Ladies and gentlemen, today we are starting the works of the 9th Moscow Conference on International Security. The fact that our forum is visited by delegates from 109 countries and 6 international organizations means that we have overcome the most complicated pandemic period. And of course, it should be attributed to military departments. They have been actively used to render assistance to the population. We have accumulated precious experience, and it allows us to stay quite optimistic about the future. This year, we are celebrating quite a sad anniversary of the history of our country. 80 years ago, on the 22nd of June in 1941, the Great Patriotic War started, and it lasted 1,418 days and nights. During the Great Patriotic War, the Soviet Union lost over 27 million people, both among the military personnel and also amongst the civil population. We would like to preserve our memory about all those victims, regardless of their nationality. And we are thankful to our leaders and populations of the countries who also treat this memory with a high level of respect. It's very important to make sure that our younger generation stay respectful of our history and prevents any efforts of glorification and Nazi revitalization. I suggest that we should do honor to the memory of the fallen during the Great Patriotic War and the Second War with a moment's silence. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Moscow Conference traditionally gives us an opportunity for an open dialogue and allows us to discuss the most relevant issues related to international security. It's worth mentioning that interstate relations have been actively developing, and that is why we can see that our priorities related to the Moscow Forum have also changed. Not long ago, we paid particular attention to our fight against terrorism in this multipolar world. Right now, we are more concerned about different trends, formation of new global coalitions, where we can see the segregation into us and them. We can see the growing role of sovereign states, who are now particularly responsible for ensuring security for the population. Pandemic demonstrated that state borders are of great importance, and only at the national level we can promptly take containment measures and render assistance to our population. Another trend that can be seen now is aggressive economic pressure that is put on different states as a way to change policy of sovereign states. We can see different economic and financial sanctions, and together with force interaction, it really changed the landscape. It provokes different military incidents and different campaigns related to disinformation. At the same time, such means become really universal, and they are used in any region in the world. It can be particularly seen in Southeastern Asia, and countries there are forced to make their choice, and they are forced to create different structures similar to NATO. And just like in Europe, we can see a sprawl of different commands of readiness, and we can see different strike groups. And on top of military and maritime training, we can see a use of different aircrafts, and also that actually presents a particular threat for us. We can see that starting from the Cold War in Europe, we saw the special system of reaction to different critical situations to prevent bilateral agreements, and it can be used for different incidents for their prevention, but it is not the case in the Asian Pacific region. We also have quite a number of different territorial disputes. We can see announcement of the so-called air zone control areas. We supposed that security issues and the development of different incident mechanism prevention should be discussed in Asia in multilateral formats. It should be done with participation of ministry within the Asian Pacific regions, and we are ready to share our experience in order to solve this problem. Another trend is the deployment of ABA system, and we can see that they are used together with strike warfare. Russian experts have pointed out many times to the stabilizing role of anti-missile defense in the Asian Pacific region, and our assessment was completely confirmed in Europe, and there the regional anti-missile system is used as one of the deterrent elements for Russia used by NATO. That is why all the statements that it's not aimed at Russia or China cannot withstand any criticism. The situation is also aggravated by the fact that the United States withdrew from INF treaty, and it seems that right now we don't have any constraints or barriers for the creation and deployment of missiles of this class, especially in Asia. From the military point of view, the use of missiles together with anti-missile defense system can really change the balance of power, not only in the regions but also in the whole world. And if a decision regarding the deployment of middle-range missiles is to be taken, then the situation will impose a particular threat also for the eastern regions of the Russian Federation. ABM-related threats can be compensated for with the help of quantitative augmentation of missiles and improvement of their technical properties and improvement of the use of these arms. Well, anyway, that could lead to another race of arms, and it could really hamper the economic development of the regions, which is regarded as driving force of the global economy. Recently, the military cooperation of Russia with the countries of region has really expanded. We keep on cooperating with different countries in order to strengthen their potential and potential of their armed forces. We are ready to train personnel and to pass our experience for them. We work in bilateral formats, and also we work together with ASEAN countries and also with ABMM. Recently, we can see that we improved the quality of our relations with strategic partners like China, India, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, and Mongolia. We also expanded our dialogue with Indonesia, Philippines, and Brunei, and we wanted to expand our work further on. The situation in Afghanistan requires particular attention, both from the neighboring countries and also the international organization. It is necessary to admit that over the past 20 years, the presence of the command of the Western Alliance, they still haven't managed to achieve real results in stabilizing and formation of stable structures for management. After the withdrawal of NATO forces, we can another civil war with all the negative consequences, further deterioration of the life conditions, mass migrations, extremism within neighboring countries. During the whole period of NATO presence in Afghanistan, the Russia side has appealed to the consolidation of efforts and development of coordinated policy within Afghanistan. However, Russophobia of alliance was stronger than pragmatism, and now, in order to find a remedy, we need to take urgent measures. It's very important also to cooperate with Shanghai Cooperation Organization on that issue, because there we have members of all the countries neighboring with Afghanistan, including Iran and Pakistan. Without cooperation with Islamabad and Tehran, it won't be able to put an end to the situation in Afghanistan. In the framework of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, we're also going to take measures to improve and to strengthen our potential and the potential of the members of the organization in a new condition. Just like before, we are open for the dialogue with our Western partners. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa and Middle East are still suffering from the color revolution. In the region where we have quite an increase of a population, we need to ensure economic preconditions for decent living conditions. And measures taken by the national governments are not sufficient and are not allowed to stabilize the situation, put an end to this crisis. As terror organizations also a major threat for the stability of the region. And after the events taken in Syria and Iran, we can see migration of the militants to other countries. We can see that a lot of militants were taken to Libya. Terrorist cells can also be seen in Mali, in the Central African Republic and Mozambique. We can see a lot of efforts aimed at attracting terrorist group in order to boost the democratization process of the sovereign system in separate countries, and also to get control over natural resources. Well, use of terrorists as an instrument of political influence, well, that is a very dangerous game. We can see with the help of Syria that there are a lot of different example of facts that point out that the terrorists can use the skills and knowledge that they get in order to use them during terror attacks in their historical motherland. So the Ministry of Russia is much in favor for the development of friendships and mutually beneficial cooperation with African countries, especially considering the fact that starting from anti-colonial fight in the region, the Soviet Union really supported national liberation movement. We do remember and we do value our common history. Up to now, many African countries had different military arms of Soviet origin. They are really efficient, reliable, and at the same time simple to use. We should say that this property is an integral part of all the machinery produced in Russia, and it also very much presented at the continent. Today we have agreements on military and military technical cooperation in almost all the countries in the region. On the margins of the forum, we plan to sign a number of similar agreements that could give us an opportunity to develop mutually beneficial cooperation and also to train personnel, as well as to introduce front-end technologies and approaches to training. In the military establishment, we have a big number of students from African countries who get their education for free on a privileged basis, and we would like to support this trend. One on the forum to hand over the Russian experience for military training is the Army International Games. The number of competition is really enormous, and there we had participants from Africa and the Middle East. We can see that the level of foreign experts is also really high. And we can see that in 2020 we had two major competitors, which was Algeria and Guinea Republic. We hope that during the forthcoming Army Games in August, this list of winners will be replenished. We do hope that this experience will also be in great demand during different training operations for national armies. We do not want to counteract anybody or to fight against anybody. We want to work in close cooperation with our partners, and we would like to sign another mutually beneficial contracts and agreements without imposing our political or economic conditions, as it is the case in the Western world. The Ministry of Defense of Russia applies the STEM strategy during our relations with the partners in Latin America. All the problems that have been also mentioned with regard to other regions are also the case here. We talk about the threats of terrorism, also drug trafficking, and permanent efforts to initiate another series of color revolutions. We have very good partnership relations with Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and many other countries. And for quite a few years, they have to counteract different forms of pressure up to threats of military intervention. As a result, their leaders are forced to really stay focused on their national armies and on the armament that we have, and also for performing military actions in complicated conditions. And of course, Russian support in this context is particular in demand. We can see some positive trends related to our cooperation with Bolivia, Brazil, Peru, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. We also can see very good perspective and chance to establish the good relations related to the security issues in polar regions. And there we could use the techniques and use our efforts and also experience to train militants in severe climatic conditions. Participation of national delegations in the conference and forum army and also participation in the army games could further improve the quality of our relations and improve the situation in the region in general. A few words about the situation in Europe. Today in the continent we have a well-pronounced trend to strengthen this military direction, and North Atlantic Bloc has been increasing the number of military groups and try to work on different routes, trying to take their troops closer to Russia and Belarus. A very good example is a training called Defend Europe, and during that training they tried to give the try the western area of alliance. And also we can see some intensive military action in Arctica. NATO summit that was conducted in Brussels on the 14th of June was another confirmation of the transformation of the bloc and from the regional one into a global military political one. The solutions were taken during the summit, also regarding the expenses of the member states and improvements of their nuclear deterrence potential could really strengthen interaction in Europe. At the same time, the form of dialogue that is supported by the Brussels, suggested in the framework of the bloc Russia-NATO, does not diminish the tension in the bilateral relations, especially since that some European countries are interested in the conflict escalation with Russia. A good example to that, the actions of Ukraine, and there, on the eve of the Brussels summit, they provoked another crisis in Donbass. In general, the situation in Europe is really explosive, and it requires some specific measures for de-escalations. The Russian side suggested a number of measures. For example, we talked about probable trainings in order to stabilize the situation there. Another suggestion was made in a statement of the President of the Russian Federation regarding imposing the moratorium on the deployment of mid-range and mid-range missiles in Europe. It represents a particular danger for the population of the European countries because they can be equipped both with conventional and nuclear warheads. Their deployments in Europe could lead us to situations that we had before when Europe fell victims of this dispute between the United States and the Soviet Union. The President of the Russian Federation suggested a number of transparency measures in order to recover our mutual trust. I would like to remind you that we talked about missile 9M729 that was supposedly deployed in the Kaliningrad region, and also launch system Mk-41 based on ABA systems of the United States and Romania and Poland. We are ready to work in that domain. It's also to improve our legislative basis in order to prevent incidents, especially when it comes to our military vessels and aircraft. On the bilateral level, we managed to agree upon a number of addendums and agreements in order to really put an end to this conflict, and it's really important to continue our dialogue in this context. What about other agreements, including Vienna documents? We think that it is sufficient for disseminating information about the major events for the military training and preparedness. We could talk about the revision of the Vienna Agreement, but only later on, as soon as we again establish trust between our states. What about the development of the situation in Europe, including in the sphere of control over arms? Well, a lot depends on the United States. The results of the recent meeting in Geneva between the President of Russia and the United States again pointed out to the fact that we have to renew our strategic dialogue. We have a lot of issues, outstanding issues, and of course it takes participation of all the parties involved to solve all of those problems. Experts of the Ministry of Defense of Russia are ready to take an active part in that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Moscow conference is giving birth to another stage of international meetings where we can discuss global and regional security. A number of regional problems that were previously classified as our priorities are now losing their importance. Hyper-sound, digitalization and robotization are now some of our priorities, as well as space and cyber security, and it's now actively used in the military sphere. We can see different space and cyber commands within our armed forces, and their main task is not defense, but planning and conducting different offensive operations in various spheres. We should be particular about international obligations, and they should not be substituted by unilateral sanctions, and implementation of some order would be based on some vague and unclear rules. We can see another counteraction, and it is now even more dangerous than it was the case during the Cold War. Military personnel around the world, just like nobody else, we know that war is a real disaster. Great musician and humanist Mstislav Ostapovich once told me that he knows how to put an end to the war. I would like to take the orchestra to the front, to the war, and play something that will make them stop and to put their arms aside. That's what he said. At that point, I had quite a number of questions related to this suggestion, but now he was right, because orchestra is not a group of musicians. First of all, it is a group of experts in their domains, united by some common values and ideas. Moscow conferences are attended by real professionals, and we are kind of orchestra, and we are here to put an end to a de-escalation and to prevent armed conflicts in any regions of the world. I would like to wish you a fruitful world and a good stay in Moscow, in the capital of our Russian Federation in Moscow. Thank you for your attention.